Hey guys, how you doing today? It's P.E. Gilbert, your blogger, writing consultant and the author to the fantasy novella The Sultan's Daughter, and within the last couple of weeks an interview with Christopher Nolan, his wife and the cast of Tenet has been published in Entertainment Weekly, wherein they discuss their new upcoming film. But before we go any further with today's content, hit that subscribe button. The plot for Nolan's new film has been shrouded in secrecy, as we discussed in the last video on what Tenet is about, and Nolan's ability to keep us guessing showed no let-up in this interview with Entertainment Weekly. During the interview, Nolan discussed many things. Crucially, he spoke about the meaning of the film's title, saying that Tenet is the name of the organisation into which the protagonist gets inducted. Is that just what Tenet means? Really? Is Nolan seriously telling us that all that stuff we discussed in the previous video about Tenet being a palindrome, about the word's origin, and about the Sata Square has no bearing on the film's plot? I cannot quite believe that. Perhaps all that we discussed last time around is part of this organisation's DNA and its raison d'etre. Nolan sadly did not elaborate. Instead, he continued by briefly touching upon the physics, such as the small matter of entropy, that is a theme of the film. Plus, he made a hint about Maxwell's demon theory, as he said that Tenet is not a time travel film. It deals with time and the different ways in which time can function. Not to get into a physics lesson, but inversion is this idea of material that has had its entropy inverted, so it's running backwards through time relative to us. That sounds like a very complicated physics lesson if you ask me. Yet, somehow, Nolan even makes that sound enticing. If only he had been my physics teacher in high school, I might have actually paid attention in class. It is a shame that Nolan did not speak more about entropy inverted, as that would have been fascinating. Instead, he spoke about why he chose J.D. Washington for the main role. Apparently, he first watched J.D. play as the NFL player Ricky Jarrett in the HBO sports comedy Ballers, and then began to seriously consider casting him for the main role in Tenet after watching the Spike Lee film BlacKkKlansman. Upon watching that film, Nolan felt that the role was a turning point for J.D. Washington. John David was the very charismatic lead in that great film, Nolan said. That felt like destiny at that point. He's a star. Perhaps Nolan is hinting here that J.D. has the capability to emulate his famous father, Denzel Washington. Maybe in Tenet, Nolan is giving J.D. the platform by which to fulfill his destiny, even overtake his Oscar-winning father. Subsequently, Nolan was asked about the character that J.D. plays in Tenet, and here's what he said in response. We're dealing in a world of espionage. We're dealing in a world of hidden identities. John David is playing an operative who is known by the term protagonist. Tenet is the name of the organisation into which the protagonist gets inducted. He is very much a presence at the heart of the film, but unlike a Bond, he has a very warm emotional accessibility. Nolan has previously spoken about his love for James Bond films, but clearly this is his way of saying that JD's character in the film is not like the iconic spy created by Sir Ian Fleming. Rather, that JD's character in the film is his own, even if both characters are in the world of spying. When asked about whether Robert Pattinson was also a protagonist in the film, Nolan laughed. "We think he may be called Neil," he said. "You never really quite know what's going on with these identities." Nolan then went on to describe Neil, like that's his real name, as a slightly rascally character who operates within what they refer to as this twilight world of operatives in different secret services. Then there is Kenneth Branagh's Russian agent character. In the same interview with Entertainment Weekly, the actor spoke about how much Nolan emphasised that he was playing an irredeemably evil character. "He's a baddie, there's no question about that," Branagh said. "When Chris cast me in the picture, he was at great pains to make sure that I understood that this character was unremittingly dark and that he was a pitiless, avaricious, mean, desperate, and terrifyingly dangerous individual." As for Elizabeth Debicki, Nolan said that she portrays Branagh's character's estranged wife, who has got herself into a very tricky situation with her husband. This is because her relationship with John David's character is ambiguous and complicated. Nolan then went on to address a question about Aaron Taylor Johnson, who has been mentioned in the film's cast, but has seemingly yet to be seen in any of the trailers or the promotion material for the film. Aaron Taylor-Johnson is indeed in the film, Nolan said. He's an important part of the film. Yes, there are no photographs of him, that is true. He is briefly glimpsed in the second trailer. He's also completely unrecognisable. There are all kinds of things that happen in terms of where the story goes as the film develops, and where it winds up in the later stages, that we don't want to spoil for people. After that, Nolan spoke about the sets used in Tenet, and even he was taken aback by the size and the scale of it all. And this, coming from a man who has directed huge IMAX films before, such as Interstellar, Inception, and the Dark Knight trilogy. The set would certainly rank as one of the largest scale outdoor builds of all time, he said. It's colossal. By the way, that plane scene in the trailer is real. Nolan has always tried to make his films as practical and as physical as possible, and he does his utmost to stay away from CGI and other kinds of special effects. Thus, when he destroyed the plane as seen in the trailer, he didn't use CGI or even miniatures. He bought an old Boeing 747 and blew it up. His wife, Emma Thomas, explained, "We ended up with a tiny number of visual effects shots. We were originally thinking that we might have to be up in the 700 to 1,000 shot count range, but ended up way south of that because we managed to do so much of it practically." In fact, Nolan was so keen for everything to be as practical as possible that Robert Pattinson did a lot of his own stunts, including the elaborate car chase sequence. In the interview with Entertainment Weekly, our Pat said, "It's funny, I did 1 day's training for the stunt driving. I thought that I wasn't going to be doing any stunt driving in it, but then I ended up doing tons and tons. I remember doing one sequence where me and John David are in a BMW with an IMAX camera rigged on the hood, which means you can't see anything through the windscreen, basically. And also, if you turn slightly too much to the left or right, the rig hits the road, which is kind of terrifying." John David's turning to me and saying, "Are you like a stunt driver or something? Have you rehearsed this? Under normal circumstances, you wouldn't really be allowed to do this, but Chris has so much control over the set, you get to do the actual fun stuff, which normally would be reserved for experts and not people who can't even parallel park." By the way, if you are worried for our Pats' safety or anyone else's on the set, Nolan quashed any such worries by ensuring that safety procedures were adhered to and that Pattinson had only done the stunts after passing the training. "Rob is being typically cheeky and self-deprecating," Nolan said in response to what Arpat said about his driving skills, or lack thereof. His day of stunt training was actually a day of ability assessment by our own stunt team, who found him to be an excellent driver who was more than capable of safely performing the required shots, none of which, for the record, were as difficult as parallel parking. Following on from this, Nolan spoke about why he chose to shoot the film in 7 different countries rather than using a warehouse and a green screen for some of the locations, like so many other movies do. He explained, "I think if you're working on a film where you come in on a Tuesday and there's a blue screen and then you change it on a Wednesday to a green screen, no one's really going to care. But if you are in Tallinn in Estonia and then you get on a plane and you're in Amalfi in Italy, it's an incredible change of scene and brings with it a feeling that seeps into the movie." Nolan was then asked some questions about whether the pandemic, or rather the Dark Lord that shall not be mentioned, has affected making Tenet. Filming had wrapped up by the time the virus broke out, but there was still a lot of work to be done in post-production. However, Nolan shook his head and nonchalantly responded, "Well, fortunately for us, our creative process for many years now has been fairly adaptable to the current conditions. I've always liked to do this visual effects with double negative in London, so since Batman Begins, we've been doing that down the line remotely. We've been able to adapt our process without creative compromise, and we feel very fortunate in that regard." The music composer for Tenet, Ludwig Göransson, agreed. As it happens, Göransson had been about to record the soundtrack with an orchestra when the country, that being the United Kingdom, shut down. To get round the pandemic, Göransson said, "We've been recording the musicians in their houses individually, and then my engineers putting it together. You don't get the traditional orchestra sound, but the sound that we do get is actually very fitting for the score." Lastly, Nolan spoke about the weight of expectation for this film, especially as cinemas and executive producers need this film to be a box office mega hit following months of movie theatres being closed due to the pandemic. I can really only take responsibility for finishing the film and trying to make an entertainment that's worth going back to the movies for, Nolan said. That's the kind of film we've always tried to make, and Tenet is no exception. You have to admire Christopher Nolan's modesty and calmness. The pressure he's under would be enough to break most directors, but not him. He seems relaxed and able to carry this burden, seemingly without realizing how much is resting on his shoulders. Perhaps Nolan is confident because he has a good story. Kenneth Branagh divulged a few new details on the Armageddon threat that his villainous character poses when he said that Tenet is an espionage piece that's dealing with a global threat to the world. A nuclear holocaust is not the greatest disaster that could befall the human race. Tenet discusses an even worse possibility, and it is wrapped up in this mind-boggling treatment of time that continues Christopher Nolan's preoccupations in films way back to Memento through Interstellar and Inception. Branagh's words underline why Nolan rightly has this quiet, reassuring confidence when speaking about Tenet and dealing with the pressures he's under. When you hear about a film like Tenet, as Branagh has described it, it is small wonder that Nolan believes that moviegoers will return in their droves to watch this film. In my opinion, Nolan has this confidence because he believes that moviegoers trust him. And we do. We have seen just how good his previous films have been, and we are excited to see what he has in store for us next. And that is all I have for you today, guys. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have enjoyed this video. Like, comment, and hit that subscribe button, and tell me, are you getting excited yet for Tenet? Are you ready to watch what Nolan has in store for us next? Moreover, my debut fantasy novella, The Sultan's Daughter, is out. It may not have a plot that's on the same par as Tenet, but it's short, fast-paced, and full of suspense. I have left a link in the description below. If my novella sounds like something you think you may enjoy, check it out. Otherwise, until next time, keep well. Once again, guys, I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching my video. I really appreciate it and I hope you've enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button and then you will be the first to receive more awesome content from my channel, and I hope to see you again soon.